in some ways, I think if everybody could, all the panelists could turn on their videos again and unmute, we'll come together. So I guess I'm curious, in Turkey, maybe Soylu, this is a good question for you, that in Turkey, have there been some direct impacts from the pandemic that are really impacting Türk Telekom's business and your plans around broadband and SIBA deployments?
Yeah, this is a really good question, Timon. And it's becoming more important, First of all, especially during the lockdown, internet usage behavior have changed, we saw. And we observed that when people are at home and spend time, it's getting the daily peak hours traffic rate in every normal house in a day. For example, it's 2 p.m. There is no reason to see peak traffic in normal days, but it's higher than normal days. As you can imagine, the biggest reason for increased traffic is the use of social media and video contents and online education, of course. And let me share the usage in May. Our totally data traffic usage increased about 38%. And this is awesome, right? But we didn't worry because Türk Telekom was ready, Yeah.
All right. Yeah, no, I think that we're seeing that worldwide, and I think the importance of SIBA and Volta and this work has really been amplified significantly. That there's really a big push to deploy more bandwidth, more reliable bandwidth, and that's, I think, with us and here to stay. So, Cemil, maybe a question for you. This is related to OSS BSS, but it came in really around you showed some UI and interfaces. And I guess I'd read the question is that for normal operation or just for troubleshooting? And what's the plan for full OSS integration so that they can have full automated operations and not requiring kind of a user interface UI kind of management?
Thank you for the question, and let me just first start with the last part of the question. So the automation part can be done today as well. The reason that I'm showing the NMS user interface is it is what we are used to. So as the telco operators, we already have some teams working on NMS user interfaces, and we have some habits. We cannot change them in a day. So this is why it's critical. So all of the things that can be done on the user interface can also be done through APIs. So I think we are already ready for the automation, and I don't know if it's is an okay answer for everybody, but this is the case actually.
Right. So it sounds like the Volta and SIBA infrastructure has all the northbound APIs necessary, and it's really more a matter of implementing the automation northbound of it, and that's in your plans. Terrific. So Saurav, there's been sort of a suite of questions that have come in more around technical challenges, but I think, upgrade scenarios, hit list upgrade, that kind of class of operation for large scale commercial deployment. So where is Volta and SIBA in that journey, and what are the biggest challenges that are coming up?
Yeah, that's a good question. As Cemil mentioned, right, one of our biggest technical challenges that remain in front of us is in software upgrades, and it's a remaining work because we just haven't gotten to it. There's feature completeness that we've been working on, stabilization that we've been working on, scale that we've been working on, just haven't had the time to get to software upgrades. But we, as I pointed out in my looking forward slide, that's something that we will tackle in the second half of this year. And when I talk about software upgrades, I mean it across the stack, right? So software upgrades for ONOS, software upgrades for components in the various components in Volta. I talk software upgrades for the software that goes inside the OLT.
software upgrades for the firmware that goes inside the ONU, right? So there's software upgrades that happen, inside the hardware and for the software that exists in the servers outside of the hardware. So we will be tackling this in steps, and the directive is to be as hitless as possible to traffic that is already going through the hardware. And we are not, so there are some parts for the software existing outside of the box. We do intend for it to be hitless. For the firmware inside the ONUs and OLTs, there are always sort of maintenance windows that the operators have so there isn't a strict requirement to be hitless. So we will tackle these issues, and the only directive that we have is, as much as possible that it should be hitless.
Good, thank you. Süleyman, this is maybe a little bit more of a business question, or I think maybe what prompted it is I heard you mention that you have an RFI coming up this year, and I think that prompted some interest from the community here. That's often the case. And so you mentioned a number of vendors, you mentioned the community. In this new disaggregated open source white box world, operators are mixing together parts, from different vendors. And that kind of, I would imagine, leads to buying and assembling in a new way. I mean, it used to be operators would look to a single prime vendor. That vendor would assemble everything. Yeah. So I guess I'm wondering how you and how Türk Telekom are looking at this. I mean, who's taking the ownership of putting all the pieces together?
Yeah, I think the behavior of the operators will change by means of this open source world. This is new era of fixed access telco world. This is an evolution, and I think no problem, and we can accommodate with it, right? New normal is this one. No more turnkey projects like before. No more black boxes all in one. It's new ecosystem with new vendors and solution partners, maybe. Yeah.
And I'd like to point out, actually, Timon, I would like to point out that, in the past, in the traditional networking, right, you're buying the OLT from one vendor, but it's not just the OLT, right? You're also buying the ONUs from the same vendor. And
of course,
you're getting the element management system from the same vendor, right? So there isn't something that normally, that vendor is actually trying to put pieces together from different places. And in this world, you're getting the OLT from one vendor and the ONUs from other vendors, and there isn't necessarily an EMS that you're relying on from either of those vendors. So the work is different, and but I think people are up for the challenge, and as you heard from Süleyman.
Yeah, Saurav, that's good. I mean, actually, there's some questions coming in too. Some questions about, do you have to upgrade the firmware in a GPON system or whatnot? But related to this OLT ONU compatibility, what technical challenges are there for intermixing equipment like that, and for vendors who want to come into this community and start to intermix with others?
Right. So I think the first and foremost, actually, I might, if I may, I just shared my screen. Might be easier to answer that question, because a similar question actually came up that I answered. So give me a second to share my screen. You should be able to see it right now, right?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So so let's assume that you're an OLT vendor or an ONU vendor, and you're looking to for compatibility with sort of what I call the Volta stack and ONOS and the rest of SIBA, right? So what you need to first work with is Volta southbound, right? There needs to be an OLT adapter that you can use with your OLT. It doesn't have to be a white box OLT, it can be a vendor OLT. There has to be an ONU adapter that can be used with your ONU, right? And you don't necessarily have to use the OLT and ONU adapters that you see in this picture. These are the reference ones. These are the open source ones that the community creates and supports. You can either use these, or you can leverage these to create your own adapter, or you can just go with a completely separate adapter. But the idea is that if you go with a completely separate adapter, then you have your choice of whatever interface between that adapter and your OLT. Or if you go with the Open OLT adapter, then you have to use this gRPC API that we have, which we call the Open OLT API. And then you can create your own agent inside your OLT to work with whatever ASICs or FPGAs that you have inside your OLT. So the key for bringing in new equipment and having it work with the entire stack is to be able to choose the right adapter solution. Hope that answered the question.
That's great. Thank you. I think that's helpful. So, and then I think that as a last question, a couple of kind of asking about scaling and scaling goals and scaling challenges. I think you mentioned some, both in terms of scaling up individual Volta stack and scaling out the Volta stack. I don't know that, maybe to sort of round that out, what particular challenges you're facing, or what do you think are going to be the the issues that the team and the community are facing coming forward?
Okay, so the challenges with scale are always the same. It's like peeling back an onion, right? We don't foresee any fundamental challenges. It's really when you develop software, you don't always think necessarily about scale. So when you start testing scale, you start testing performance, you run into a bottleneck. I always like to call it, scale is not a battle. It's a war. It's a series of battles. And sometimes you lose, and then you have to go back and re-strategize and re-implement parts of your solution, and then go back and fight, and you win that battle, and then you run into the next obstacle. So it's like peeling back an onion. And so that's the exercise that we have gone through over the last 4 or 5 months. We have, across the stack, we have run into bottlenecks, and we have overcome those bottlenecks. And as I was pointing out during my presentation, there are certainly things that we can do to continue improving the stack, right? And I had pointed out that there are still parts of the stack that are not performant, but we have very good ideas about how we can make that more performant. And so a single stack that way will increase in performance. But at some point, we're going to say that, no matter how much CPU, we have optimized everything, and no matter how much CPU or memory we allocate to that stack, it's not going to work beyond a certain number of OLTs and ONUs. So it's at that point when we start bringing up multiple stacks. And that's the nice part about having this entire solution be cloud native, be managed by Kubernetes, where you can spawn containers that make up that stack, and redirect OLTs and ONUs from one stack to other stack, and balance across multiple such stacks. So this work for multi-stack has already started. It was started by actually Netsia Argela folks. Sarkant has worked on it and made some good progress. And now we intend in the second half of the year to really dive into both improving the single stack and working on multiple stacks. And so I don't fundamentally see any scale technical issues. We just have to work through into peeling the onion and achieve our ultimate goal, which Cemil was mentioning. There's going to be 60 to 70 OLTs and 1,000 to 2,000 ONUs per OLT to achieve the ultimate scale goal of 128,000 subscribers supported by SIBA Volta.
Good, thank you.
I can just chime in and maybe add some challenges of the scaling part. I'm not going to dive in the technical part, which Saurav explained it perfectly. But there is a challenge with the like a live environment. So this is we are currently just doing new stuff with the scalability things, and we need to also be we have a goal to go on field. So we have a goal for OSS BSS integration. So this is a challenge for the operator side. This and will be a challenge for the operator side because we need to define the inventories and how this structure will be there. And currently we are working on it, and I'm also on the positive side that we will just solve all of these and overcome these challenges as soon as possible, and it will be much better, I think. Yeah.
Good, thank you. And so then, you know, we have one last question coming in that's maybe more business related. It's asking that, you know, do we believe that service providers will go to 100% disaggregated white box solution, as has been described today, SIBA Volta based, or will an operator keep part of their network running with a traditional supplier in order to pressure the supplier in some way? So is it, I mean, do you move wholesale, or do you split your network and continue to deploy in two ways? And Süleyman, I don't know, maybe you could provide a little color on how Türk Telekom is thinking about this.
Yeah, also this is a good question. And let's think like this. This is not a project and we will apply this project in day one and we will swap our all legacy devices with this. This will not happen anytime, okay? We will use SIBA with the legacy devices together. For example, the first day, we will deploy SIBA near the other devices. Let me say 5% of the whole network we will change. And the next year, 10%, next year, 20%. It will go like this. Our solution partners, our vendors, they are still our solution partners. We are still working with them. They are not strangers, you know. We will work with them. No problem with them. If they want to join us, they can join us. And this is not problem again. Yeah.
Yeah, terrific. Good, thank you. Well, it's an exciting future for this work, this project, this community. I want to thank all of you very much for joining us today, and thank all of our participants. And Denise, I'm going to hand it back to you to wrap us up.
Thank you everyone for joining today's webinar, and thank you to our keynote speakers today. And thank you again to AT&T, Vector Data, Radisys, and the Open Compute Project for sponsoring this program, and to all ONF members whose contributions have funded all of ONF's engineering efforts on SIBA, Volta, and the other 20 projects that together comprise ONF's portfolio for open source platforms and solutions for broadband, mobile, and next-gen SDN infrastructure. Don't forget to check out the other upcoming ONF Spotlight forums coming up later this year, and do consider participating by submitting a proposal to our online CFP or joining us. Thank you again, and have a good day.